The Power of Agile, hosted by Nagarro.
Welcome to today's episode. No one size fits all. Let's talk hybrid. Today we're diving into a topic that's shaking up how projects get done. Hybrid project management. You know, that sweet spot between rigid plans and agile flexibility? Joining us today is our very own global practice lead for project management, Michael Ziermair. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you for having me. It's great. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you back on the show, and I want to get you warmed up for all of the questions I'll be throwing your way in this episode. So I thought it would only be fair to ease you into it with a quick fire round of questions so we get to know you a bit better.
Sure, shoot away.
Great. So here we go then. Early bird or night owl?
Oh, definitely a night owl.
Okay. Optimist or realist?
I would say it's 70% optimist, 30% realist.
Chaos or control?
In work, control. At home, more chaos.
Interesting. Okay. Thinker or feeler?
I would say more on the thinking side.
I see that actually. And plan it or wing it?
I think it's the same split I had before. Professionally, more planning it. Privately, I do enjoy the occasional winging it.
Okay. Okay, and then last one before we get started then. What's one challenge that's pushed you to grow this year?
Oh, this year, I mean, I did, and I talked about this last podcast, I did a immensely cool crisis management intervention. And this year we did kind of the prolongation of that, hardening the organization, and that was a real cool topic that I was fortunate enough to tackle. So
you've never, I guess it's like the first time experience, you've never had that before?
Yeah, in that grandeur of a large organization, that was a new one for me, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. So I will start this podcast episode by reading a snippet from an article written by Elena and Andy titled Project Management Without Rigid Categories. So it begins like this. Traditional or agile, many organizations try to categorize their projects into one of these categories, but reality is often more complex. Rigid plans meet dynamic requirements. Established management methods meet iterative workflows. Anyone who tries to force such projects into traditional or agile boxes risks planning without considering reality. So here's my first question to you. It's clear everyone's buzzing about hybrid project management these days, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, to fully understand it, I like to go back quite a many few years. In the 90s, we only quote unquote had project management, which was like the buzz of the town. It just came up. And it was this idea, let's not do everything within the line organization, but have this separate project organization that helps us to tackle an initiative.
Right.
And was always defined as specified scope. It had to have its specified end date, and there was a project. And then it had huge success. And many organizations, obviously, within certain industries like construction, it was always this type of organization.
Yeah.
But especially within the upcoming IT industry, speaking of the 90s, that really helped encapsulate what it is. Like, I want to build an IT tool, and I need this specific tool within that specific time frame to achieve a goal. And as it grew and grew and grew, obviously the populace of project managers grew. And with anything that you have a large populace at, there is those who do an amazing job and who really understand it. And there is those who claim to understand it but can't follow through. And so with increasing usage of IT and increasing IT projects, obviously the need for more iterative engagements came up. So we're talking late 2000s, early 2010s, when we started going into the direction of agile. Smaller portions, still with the same goal in mind, but let's be more flexible to be able to react. And we thought for a long time that's a silver bullet. We would all move eventually to agile and all our problems are solved.
Right.
But we kind of ended up in the same conundrum where obviously you had a larger populace, so the level of quality of a Scrum Master, product owner diverged heavily. And in the end, the core problem still persists that you have to achieve a goal, a scope, an IT tool, but within the confines of the organization. And nowadays, and I'm talking the last 1 to 2 years, organizations have realized, why are we following a discussion pattern of either or, and why don't we discuss how to use a combination of the two in a manner that makes sense? And that's where the hybrid discussion came up.
I see. Okay. So we've got the history on it, and I think that's some great insights you've just shared. So can you tell me, you've spoken about traditional project management, you've spoken about agile project management. Give me 3 strengths of agile compared to traditional project management.
So I always like to draw it up according to risks, but risk is not like not just the risk of something occurring, but as risk exposure of the project. So let me give you an example. Let's discuss an innovation project. AI is all the buzz nowadays, obviously. So let's say I'm an organization and I want to use AI tools to completely overhaul my processes.
Right.
So there's a bit of established knowledge. We know what certain AI tools can and cannot do. We know about hallucination, for instance, being an issue. But the more underdeveloped the use case is, the more risks you inherently have, right?
Right.
Because obviously, I don't know how my employees will react to it. I don't know, will it give the full efficiency benefit that I was envisioning? Yeah? Is the tool as easy to use in the context that I want to use it at? Yeah. And here, this is a perfect breeding ground for agile methodologies, because I want to be quick. I want to be instantaneously be able to react to say, hey, we have seen in the last sprint, one of our core assumptions just doesn't work. I had a project, not with AI because it was years and years ago, where we tried using augmented reality for blind people, which sounds idiotic for lack of a better word because they can't see, but we used the glasses as a methodology for them to see, and then audio inputs or outputs for them to kind of get a translation.
Okay.
Yeah? And what we found is we had so many run-ins with the complexity of real life that we didn't anticipate, that we had to overhaul the solution over and over and over again. Yeah. And this is exactly where Agile shines.
I see. Okay, great. And then for balance, and because old habits die hard, what's your favorite aspect of traditional project management?
So, and traditional project management completely has its place in today's world, in my opinion. There is a lot of, let me give you actually 2 examples, because one is very construction oriented, but you can make many, many cases. So any type of project where you have huge investments, and where there is not many unexpected changes in the course of the project, at least from the conception of the project. Traditional always wins in efficiency, because I sit down, make a detailed plan throughout the whole execution cycle, plan for all eventualities, and then I execute. And obviously within the execution, I still supervise the plan, as all good traditional project management methods will do. But that allows me to bundle the resources where I need them. So a good example would be if you do any type of larger construction projects, that is exactly the methodology you follow.
Okay.
You would never start building a house and then be like, let's iteratively see whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
A more IT-heavy example would be, for instance, you have some sort of government agency that has jurisdiction over you, and they force you through a mandate to a specific date to adhere to certain conditions. So you know exactly what you have to accomplish.
Right.
There's no
leeway.
Ambiguity. Yeah, exactly. So I have to do that by X, and I have to prove to the auditors that I have done so. So here as well, I can write down the requirements, what that means for my systems in detail, and I can just do it. And there is no need for an agile methodology.
I see. Okay. And so we've spoken about agile methodology, we've spoken about traditional project management. With that in mind, where would you say then hybrid project management fits best? Is it at the portfolio level, the individual projects, or is this something an entire organization should embrace?
What I like about that question is the most dangerous thing a project manager can deal with is ambiguity. And in the word hybrid in and of itself, there's much ambiguity. So what I mean by that is, as you rightfully pointed out, there is a project level view on hybrid and there is a portfolio level view. So going to the project view first. Within the project, I have, as we discussed before, I have a scope that I have to implement by a certain date. And based on that, on a kind of isolated view, I might have a distinct preference for agile methodologies or traditional,
right?
As we established before. There's extreme examples and there is gray areas in between, of course.
Okay.
But you have a secondary, very powerful component, which is the organization. And how your organization is structured, governed, and organizes itself is extremely important to see whether or not there's a disconnect between the methodology you would employ ideally for the project,
right,
and what methodology your organization uses. Is it more a hierarchical organization with very milestone-based long-term planning, or is it more a kind of startup-esque environment where everything can change in a heartbeat?
Yes.
And that kind of informs how much needed a hybrid approach is. So if I do an agile project in a startup, why would I go hybrid?
Yeah.
But if I want to do in a very traditional organization, agile project, because it's an innovation project, then I suddenly have to tackle the issue, how do I allow the project the agile flexibility it needs? But how can it satisfy my reporting requirements as an organization? Because in the end, I want to understand what a project is, and if it has interdependencies to other projects who might run traditionally,
yes, how
does the translation work at those interfaces?
So you kind of judge it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
I guess. And I mean, is there a right or wrong way, or is it very much you go into a project or an organization, you see their way of working, and based on that and based on the deliverables, you kind of decide what's necessary here?
I would say it's going. I am fully in agreement that it will be on individual cases, but I think as an organization, what you have to have is a kind of a toolbox where you say, this is the toolbox that we have for traditional and for agile.
Okay.
And so this is kind of sanctioned by the organization itself. And this is the framework in which or the process in which we want to conduct our projects.
Okay.
But this framework is a guidance that leaves leverage for the individual project to orient itself. So it's kind of like, I have a specific segment that I have to work in.
Yeah. But
within that segment, I as a project am able to choose what is the right mixture for me to be the most efficient project I can be. So
the sense I get is the tools that the organization uses are almost like the guardrails. It's the area within which you must stay. And there is no, hey, you have to use all of these tools. It's you pick and choose which ones you want to use. And based on that, you find a combination that works with the way in which the organization works, the type of deliverables, etc.
Exactly. And for that, there is an introspection needed, right? Because a lot of organization, and also the strategic perspective, which is output of the introspection, because a lot of organization aspire to be maybe more agile as they are now, but now they are more traditional. So I need to know where we stand now, where do we aspire to be, and maybe then suddenly the friction, quote unquote, between what the project methodology requires and what the organization offers as a governance might change over time.
I see.
And keeping that, or analyzing that level of friction will, I think, in 5 to 10 years be second nature to every project manager. Because I foresee at least that the hybrid topic will encapsulate how we do projects.
Yeah, certainly. And a lot of trend watchers seem convinced that hybrid will also dominate project management in the next few years. I stumbled across an article recently that pointed to increased transparency and growing AI integration as key drivers behind this shift. So based on what you've seen, what's your take on that?
I do fully agree. I mean, obviously, today we have, and this goes for all project management methodologies, this is not traditional or agile or hybrid specific. You have the administrative component, as I call it, for project management.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a little bit different if we're talking agile or traditional, but basically it's busy work to document what we have done, how we took the decisions, what all detailed scope we have, and so on. That will be a strong area for AI to take the heat off the project management team, to automate, to kind of support as if you had several juniors on your team who can pre-write you all of these reports, etc. But then there is the human aspect of all of these projects.
Yeah.
And that is something that AI will have for a very long time, a very extremely hard time to crack the code on that one. And this is managing the emotions, the stakeholders on a human level.
Yes.
Transporting not only the information that they factually need, but they also need to feel at ease that this project is handled with care.
Yeah.
And with the professionalism that they expect. Yeah.
Okay.
So I agree. Yeah.
Interesting. And then based on that, why should teams even consider a hybrid approach? What challenges do you think it really solves? So you've just mentioned it's important that they are reassured that this project is handled with care. But what challenges do you think it solves?
So for me, it's basically being able to speak two different languages.
Okay.
So let me give you an example, obviously an anonymized version of an example of a client that I'm currently working with. So the organization is very traditional, very hierarchical, long-term planning, sometimes even years in the future. And they are now heavily investing into kind of beefing up the digitalization initiatives, redesigning processes according to state-of-the-art tooling, etc. And what they're finding is their IT teams want and need to work as agile as possible, because even though they analyzed the requirements in a very traditional manner, which would presume that you have a full set of requirements where ideally you don't have to touch them anymore, there is a lot of exemptions that there to this requirement, so to these general rules in the processes that they weren't anticipating. So they constantly have to do it's true generally, but not in those 5 cases. But those 5 cases are extremely important because those are the 5 cases we get sued. So they have learned, hey, we need this flexibility in our IT department because we cannot anticipate the shifting processes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the rest of the organization requires this project to communicate not in a, hey, this is our burn down chart. So and so many story points can we fit into one sprint.
Yeah.
But they need to know this requirement that is really important for project B is done on, 31st of December, to give a bad example. So that other really project can plan. Well, we already have the rockets handy. So yeah, that would be an example. And it's basically, hybrid takes the role of the mediator between those two languages.
Okay.
In that case.
So since there's no one size fits all, how would you recommend organizations get started with at least experimenting with hybrid project management?
So this basically encapsulates all that we have talked before. It starts with understanding where do we stand as an organization now? Where do we aspire to be for business strategic reasons? And each and every project in and of itself, and there's a simple methodology that we use. So it's not like that you have to reinvent the wheel every time. It's basically the same 4 or 5 questions on a project level you ask yourself, and usually the organization is not changing that fast. So a one-time organizational analysis is usually enough to last you for a few years. And that is then the framework where you're like, okay, this is where the organization stands. This is where I would like to stand. Do I have a disconnect? Yes or no? And if I have a disconnect, this is where the toolbox comes in that I mentioned before, where I'm like, this gives me the guidance. This is all of the tools that I can use.
Yeah.
And I want to use, for instance, to stay with the example I had before, more agile tools in my delivery. But I need to translate those in very traditional methodologies to communicate outwards what my plans and my project schedules are, so that others can use these traditional quote-unquote data points to plan their project.
That's understandable. I think there's quite a few examples out there. I think I came across one regarding IBM, and they use waterfall for the initial requirements gathering, and then agile when it comes to developing and testing. And I guess that works perfectly for the industry in which they're operating in as well. You kind of hinted on this with goals that you have, for example, and how that could potentially evolve over time. But from what you've observed, how long would you say it realistically takes to make a hybrid project management work effectively and efficiently? So would you say it's weeks, months, or are we talking years?
So funnily enough, for most organizations, they already have the bare bones in place because they tried to move agile, fully agile, understood fully agile is not where our organization can be. They kind of stopped at some point along the journey.
Right.
So you already I have not seen any organizations who have never done any attempt even at agile delivery. So usually what is needed most of the time is only quote unquote to have the initial analysis and making explicit what you're implicitly already doing. And that helps you define the decision process more easily and defining those guardrails for hybrid more easily. And that allows the project managers to make a more informed decisions.
Yeah.
And that, once again, that's why we have guardrails and processes, allows us to have a better quality project delivery on average. And that is why we recommend doing that.
Right. Okay. And of course, it instills confidence in senior management as well. And just going back to the topic then of goals and objectives, I'm just wondering, is there a right way to do hybrid project management, or is, seen as we have some moving targets that evolve within the organization, how do you kind of manage this?
So that's exactly the reason why we say it's a case-by-case basis, because it's hard to say there's a right way of of hybrid.
Okay.
It was the same with Agile to a degree.
Yes.
I mean, methodology-wise, most people went with a version of Scrum, but even there, you have the religious textbook version, and you have the actually implemented version that organizations used. And very often, they knew about what the religious decree would say would be an ideal sprint duration. But in the end, they found that for them, a longer sprint duration works. Or for them, having certain traditional methodologies sprinkled in, like they have a stage gate process in between, made sense to give their management team possibilities to interact with the project at certain predetermined points before the rest of the budget was allocated.
I see.
And that's why it's important to really, that's why we stress so much, and I think this is much overlooked in the discussion. We stress the organization very much because we say this is the key, and you need to understand how much you are at odds with the organizational design, with your project design, and that will help you much more easily. Because sometimes what I feel like is, and best example is agile projects in very traditional organizations, they feel like we have no idea how to communicate with the rest of the organization effectively. And very often what you see is, if the topic is important enough, they say, hey, our organization doesn't support this too well. Well, let's do our own separate small company. Or let's put the whole team, if not in a legally separate entity, at least in a kind of organizational separate entity. We form a team in the organization.
Together.
Task force, kind And that is just an attempt to kind of be like, hey, we know you don't fit into in the streamline of our organization, so we put you on the outside and hope you work better.
Yeah.
And what we say is, you don't have to pull teams out of the organization to achieve that. With the right rules and with the right analyzing tools, you can do it within the line organization.
Okay, interesting. And I also came across another article which lists the top 10 project management trends for 2025. Mm-hmm. So things like certifications and continuous learning, gaining ground, the need for customizable and scalable tools, collaboration platforms being front and center, and an increasing reliance on data-driven decision-making. So as 2025 concludes, do you feel those trends captured the reality? Or would you add anything else to that lineup that's shaping project management now or even in the near future?
I think it encapsulates it pretty well. So I'm completely on board with the data-driven decision-making. Yeah. Tools make it much more easier. And it goes towards the key point that transparency is the best cure for fear and emotions on the stakeholder side that the project might be mismanaged. And the more concise you are in your data, the better it is to combat that.
Yes.
I am a bit benefactor of certifications on one hand, but I think certifications are, quote unquote, just an add-on to kind of prove to yourself and others that you understand the professional principles behind project management. They are not the only part to your project management education. Because especially dealing with the human element, which is the one thing that the AI cannot replace, that is something that you can learn methodologies, but you can only experience it in practice. And so here, obviously, the actual exposure to projects is very important. And I think looking back at what I mentioned at the very top of the podcast, the over-reliance on certifications alone as a sign of a good or bad project manager led to the influx of project managers and the sudden downfall at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, where people felt like projects weren't delivering on time as much as they used to. We have to reshape the methodology tree towards Agile. And I think it's the same that happens with Agile now. So that's why we're moving into hybrid. And I feel like methodology should only be a tool that we use to achieve what we set out. So it's basically like a handyman. Obviously, he has to have good tools to do the job, but in the end, I pay him for the service and not for his tool set that he brings to my home.
100%. It's about that adaptability and, like you said, the practical emphasis, because if you are relying on everything to be textbook or prescriptive to an extent, there's never going to be something that covers all the potential scenarios you may face. Okay, great. And then to wrap up, what's one practical takeaway our listeners can apply with their teams immediately after tuning into this episode?
So, I mean, depends, of course, what your position in your company is. But as a project manager, you can do this simple thought experiment where you're like, if I did my project in isolation, not considering my organizational context, would I do anything different than I do now? In terms of methodology, in terms of reporting, all of the day-to-day that I do as a project manager. And if your answer is yes to that, there might be a broader set of methods you can use to basically establish this hybrid coexistence in your project. That you have a disconnect between the methodology that is best for you and within the and best for the organization. And if you're on the level as a PMO leader, obviously you can ask yourself the same question, but with the portfolios that you're managing. So would you do anything different? Would it help you deliver more value, meaning efficiency in delivering the projects, if you had a little bit more flexibility with certain projects in terms of how they can execute, be it agile or traditional? And these are thought experiments that you can do on your own. And obviously what we can offer, or what we have done, is we have created a framework that makes it easier to analyze and kind of display it also visually so that you can see where you have your disconnects or not.
Okay, that's useful. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for unpacking hybrid project management with us today. I'm sure our audience got plenty of inspiration to rethink their own project approaches.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was a great talk as always.
It was a pleasure, and that's a wrap on today's deep dive into hybrid project management. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and put one hybrid practice into action this week. Until next time, keep managing smart and stay curious.